Hi, I'm McRae, and welcome back to Comedy Means Business, the show examining today's comedy industry, where the truth is, being funny is maybe half the battle. Yes, jokes still matter, timing, originality, point of view, but these days, digital savvy or the lack thereof can make or break a career. And the comics finding real success aren't just performers, but entrepreneurs as well. The comics I'm talking about understand that they are the brand, and that every spot, every podcast episode, every social post is part of building it. Of course, past a certain point, building a comedy career becomes a team sport. Managers are often among those working most closely with stand-ups in navigating their journeys. And today we're speaking with two, Logan Potter and Alan McRae of Authentic Talent and Literary Management. Now celebrating its 20th year, Authentic has put a growing focus on comedy of late, while working alongside talents like JP Smoove, Lisa Ann Walter, Asif Ali of the Deli Boys, and Troy Awada of The Daily Show. In this episode, Logan, Alan, and I dig into what it really takes to build and sustain a comedy career in the digital age. From actionable tips for online growth, to what comedians often misunderstand about managers, and the lessons these two have taken from their journeys in the business. Logan and Alan, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, man. Stoked to be here.
Can we walk through the current financial landscape for comedic talent and sort of like the ways in which the digital space is at the heart of that? Because, that's what I wanted to dive into first and foremost, is just like, the extent to which digital is what comedians really need to be thinking about mastering as they go about building their careers.
Yeah, I mean, my background definitely comes from being more of a traditional comedian. I was a comedian for a long time.
Oh, wow.
Did a lot of stage work and, directing and running comedy theaters and stuff like that before I became a manager. And at the time, there was a very sort of clear ladder for comedians to start on stage and then move into some of these kind of more beginner comedic spaces like Comedy Central and, even some of the upstart digital places. And then it was TV, right? Mm-hmm. There was a lot more programming. We obviously got into the golden age of streaming television, which I don't think Logan and I either of us ever experienced. We started after the gold rush was over, which super fun. But I came into being a manager expecting to do a lot more work in traditional television and developing.
Late night?
Yeah, late night. I mean, I have a couple of late night writers, but it's such a small niche in my business now. I mean, I would say that at least 60% of my business is digital now.
Wow.
And that's everything from comedians doing influencer work or making stuff for social media, making stuff for digital distribution companies, upstart streamers, stuff like that. But it's way, way more of a digital business than I ever expected to do. And, being kind of a old DIY punk kid, I actually really appreciate the spirit of what these kids have to do to really be seen and really make money now.
Elaborate on that.
Yeah, I mean, something that always frustrated me when I was in the theater scene, the sort of UCB, like, I'm going to pay these people this amount of money to move up a ladder to then potentially get these industry accolades. And I would talk to people. I'd be like, look, you may not be on stage at UCB sort of going through these ranks, but let's create something. Let's do something. Let's build a show and sell tickets and figure out your own voice. And, I think there's a lot of bad lessons taken from the really early generation of UCB all becoming really, really famous, that people thought that was the only way to do it. Mm-hmm. Now with the digital world and the way that, Logan and I and the Authentic Comedy team are kind of working, it's really doing it yourself. It's figuring out what your brand is. It's figuring out what your style of comedy is. It's going out there and, look, getting brands to pay for something so, you're not going to end up with a broad city, but make your own thing, right?
Right.
And that speaks to my ethos a little bit better than waiting around and having somebody else tell you what to do.
Yeah. How big of a piece of everything are these brand partnerships? Because I talked to one manager that was saying, I essentially feel like I'm a brand manager at this point, just because that's become like a big piece of the pie for certain people.
Yeah, so my background was always digital. I started in influencer, I did music, and then I started building out comedy. And so for me, there was no traditional pathway. I didn't know a single player in the film and TV world. I barely knew people in the traditional comedy world. Everything that I had to do to build my clients early on was digital. It was finding brand partnerships. It was figuring out a strategy for them to post on YouTube so they could monetize with AdSense. It was using the TikTok Creator Fund and finding out the right time to join and understand how monetizing those videos worked and serializing content. And so for me, it's always been baked into the digital strategy. And on the partnerships side of that, brand partnerships for comedians have ebbed and flowed and looked very different depending on specifically what the comedian's online brand is. A comedian can say one thing on stage and have a very specific brand and character that they play on stage. Then they can have something completely different online, and that could be the thing that's monetizable for them. What we considered brand friendly, I would say, in the last 5 years or so, especially during the pandemic, has changed pretty dramatically because brands are open to being riskier and a little bit edgier. I think Dr. Squatch is a great example.
What is that?
It is a men's soap brand. And a couple of years ago, they really started branching themselves into the stand-up space. They're now partnered with Don't Tell. But prior to that, they had done what they called their Soapbox series, which was a series of comedians. They paid to commission a live performance. It was hosted by Stavros, and there was a bunch of up-and-coming comedians on the lineup. And they were paying comedians to do what they already did, but add one joke about soap somewhere in their set. That was the whole partnership, but it was so cool because it was the first time that I had seen a brand really engage in what comedians were doing without making them change themselves in the name of brand friendliness. And Dr. Squatch has taken a lot of risks since then. They infamously did the Sydney Sweeney bathwater soap.
Oh, yeah.
And
So they could be telling dirty soap jokes.
Yeah, that was
Okay.
that was honestly what a lot of it became. And but it was so cool to see a brand doing that for the first time. And since then, there have been brands like Java Monster that have started to engage on that level. More and more brands are starting to sponsor stand-up tours. But before that, it was a game of like turning stand-up comedians into online sketch comedians so that they had enough of a niche to secure brand partnerships that felt safe enough and that brands could see themselves integrated in. So
Right.
it's been a changing landscape. We're seeing more in stand-up than we did in the last 4 years, for sure.
Could you sort of compare the experience right now of working with someone who's a digital-first creator and approaching comedy from that point of view versus someone who comes at it as a stand-up and doesn't understand a thing about the digital space?
And there's still plenty of those people out there. Let's
Yeah.
be fully honest.
Yeah.
Including some of our own clients. When I was growing up, I'm older than Logan, but when I was growing up, the whole idea of selling out was sort of, it was scary, right? The entire Nirvana ethos of we can't sell ourselves to corporate America and all of that, but that's just not the way you play the game anymore, because corporate America has closed the door a little bit when it comes to, being on television, things like that. And so we have to be very honest with our clients that, unless they have a really specific plan about how to work themselves into a very small group of people, that just has to be part of it, right? And whether that is branding or touring, right? The digital part of touring is such a big deal now. Where, I one of my clients, Jordan Fisher, who's an incredible stand-up, and he's been on the Tonight Show, and he was a JFL New Face, and he had all this really cool stuff going on. Very recently, did a viral sketch called Gangsta Chef, where he did a character and he cooked a meal, and it was something he tried. He had never done anything. He was only just posting stand-up clips, and he picked up 600,000 followers on Instagram.
Wow.
And now his shows are selling out, and he's getting these opportunities to grow in a really meaningful way by embracing this digital landscape. And I think it's something that, as a comedy team, at Authentic, we're just we're hyper-focused on, because this is a way to generate enough revenue for our clients to be able to do what it is that they actually want to do, right?
Yeah. And kind of thinking about your question about digital first versus like somebody who's traditional stand-up first. Digital first is truly a game of finding the right character and the right serialized content to make you a true digital first creator. I think that a big focus for me and us at the group are kind of putting together ways to turn traditional onstage talent into not even digital first talent, because I think at this point it's become like a buzzword because everybody has to become so digital now. But I think that on like the digital first side, it's a game of branding exclusively, and on the traditional side, it's a game of essentially scouting for your audience and going into what your shared interests are, whether it's things you tell jokes about, things you're doing in your day-to-day life that you're excited about, and going to those communities and finding your audience within those communities. We're like scouting for talent based on our interests, and I frame it to clients the same way, that you should be scouting for your fan base that's going to have longevity for you based on shared interests that make them feel connected to you outside of the comedy. And I think that's how you bridge somebody traditional and approach branding, partnerships, digital monetization as the fan base grows for somebody who's...
And to be very clear about it, I mean, we're not a digital company. Right. There are managers out there, entire management companies built around influencers and digital branding, and these folks who are doing this as a speciality. Right.
Right.
We look at our clients, and to use the old industry word, multi-hyphenates, this is part of the pie. Right. We want people who want to do a lot of different things, but also understand that this is where the money's coming from now.
Right.
And having clients going and doing things for digital first distribution networks and specifically doing it for brands is just something that we have to help them get their minds around, right? Because again, Comedy Central is not riding on a white horse to save us. You know what I mean? We have to go find the money. We have to go find the way to make the next generation of comedies that people under 30 want to watch.
Yeah, and it seems like more than ever, you kind of just have to pull yourself up by your bootstraps. It seems like people have been pointing out to me like these streamers aren't even investing in some of the stuff they were recently when it comes to incubating talent. Like even that is kind of going away. So it's just like it seems tough.
Yeah, I think there's something interesting. Logan and I have been talking about it. We did pretty well at JFL last year. JFL being sort of traditional gatekeeper, people who kind of show who the next generation of talent are. But while we were up there, something that was really, really stark was how much even an old, an older sort of traditional, I mean, probably the most traditional way to find talent, right? Which is JFL, right? This is new faces being the way that all of these comedians that for the last however many years were found. The people that were there were not the big networks. It was Smosh. It was, it was Dropout. It was places like that were doing the same thing that we are, which is embracing the future.
You're talking about now?
Like
the
this
recent
the one that just happened. I mean, we had 5 new faces up there, which was awesome. But the best part was them being able to get known by the people who are kind of creating what the future is, as opposed to kind of waiting around for the past to come back, which I think is I still feel like some people are doing that. They're just sitting around and being like, oh man, hopefully someday TV will come back, and when's pilot season and all that. And look, I mean, I think I lived through one pilot season as a manager, and it was kind of dying then, right? And so for us, it's like, all right, how do we figure out where the live body's at?
So in terms of the digital of it all, I'm sure it's different for everybody, but there is a tension I've noticed among comics, among reps. Like there's some people particularly feel like some of these influencer people are taking jobs from comedians. They're taking stage space. Do you? I
mean, you're not wrong. It's just a funny. It's a funny thought process.
So that's not wrong.
Well,
there's something to that.
I think that the reality is that like we made at some point in the last 5 to 8 years, we made influencer a dirty word, which is wild, because at the end of the day, all it is describing somebody who is going online, they're creating content, and people are consuming what they're selling. And by that definition, every comedian is an influencer. And I think that the reason that we go, these influencer people are taking jobs, is because we see very funny, talented, successful people like Noel Miller or Connor Wood, who started their careers online and found their fan bases online, and they're transitioning now to traditional stage work. And they're killing it, and that just because they started online does not make them any less of a comedian than somebody who started in the clubs, right? But they came up with a very different experience. And I think that when people go, these influencer people are taking jobs, which I loved the voice you did that rocked. I think that ultimately what they mean is like, they didn't know, like some of these people, right, and I don't know all of their backgrounds, like some of these folks that came up that way, they did not come up in the club scene. They didn't grind their way through New York or Chicago or LA. They weren't part of UCB or Groundlings or whatever it is, right? They just didn't come up with that traditional infrastructure. But I think the more and more young comedians we see that are coming up under this digital landscape, significantly fewer of them are going to have come up with that kind of like grind set in the club background, because building a fan base is different.
Right.
It just isn't the same.
I think what part of what people point out, though, is that sometimes you see some of these influencer type people, what have you, getting huge success out of the gate, and then they go and do a tour and it kind of falls apart because they don't have the material to back it up. Are there kind of, you know, digital native people you would not sign or be reluctant to sign because you just don't feel they yet have the chops and the material and the work behind that, or not necessarily? Like, how do you evaluate that?
There's a pretty stark difference between somebody who is a comedian who is doing influencer work and an influencer. And again, I don't want to kind of do what Logan was talking about in terms of taking this idea of influencer and saying that's a bad thing, because it's not. And I do think part of the reason that comedians get upset about influencers taking their jobs is because they're grinding in a different way than they did, right? All these people who ground it out in the clubs and they went to UCB and took levels 1 through 157 with, you know, and the Del Close Marathon and all that, that's not any harder work than what some of these digital comedians are doing, where they're putting out stuff day in and day out.
Right.
And, you know, they are just doing it in a different way. And I think to some degree, you know, I feel kind of bad for the kind of tweener generation of comedians who maybe missed out on the real golden age of the like traditional ladder UCB thing and the influencer digital world, because they were told to do 47 different things and they would try and they would keep on trying to do stuff, and then somebody would tell them they had to do something else to become famous, and you know that can be difficult. But
For sure.
But yeah, it's for us, like when we're signing folks, right? When we're taking a look at somebody who maybe has a huge social media account, they have to be funny, right? They have to be smart. They have to be able to do more than just one thing. Because again, we're not Authentic is not a digital influencer company. We're a traditional company that understands the power of digital.
Right.
And so for us, we look at a talent and we evaluate them as we would anybody else. But having a huge digital presence is a huge plus.
Sure. So if you have someone like a comedian who doesn't yet understand the social thing or the digital thing, like what are the steps you walk them through? Can we talk through some of that, and also like expand on the tips we can talk about for people in that situation?
Yeah.
Logan's about to cook, y'all.
Love it.
Put on your aprons.
Yeah, I mean, like, this is something that I do every day. I have a lot of great developmental up-and-coming stand-up comedians on my roster. People like Jamie Wolf and Bianca Parotto and Matt Ross, who come from a various number of scenes and have come up in the way that we were just talking about. Like, they've been on stage for years. They came up in the very traditional club sense. They were doing open mics. They realized they wanted to do this, and then they started putting themselves on stage as much as they could. And I'll use Jamie as an example, because when I started working with Jamie, he was posting clips 3 times a week, but he was kind of like, okay, I've been stagnant. Like, I haven't grown a lot. What else can I do? And so one thing that I focus on frequently is emerging platforms. Where are comedy fans in many communities, right? Like in the 2010s, this is what Tumblr was built for. And I'm convinced it's coming back. Clock that. Do you guys hear that? Tumblr's coming back. But now it's Reddit. Like in 2025, Reddit is the smartest place that a comedian can go to find their fan base.
Clip it.
Clip it. I don't care if they golf, if they're sober, if they love fashion and beauty. Within all of those verticals, there are fans who love comedic content. And I think that's why you see so many like fashion and beauty influencers who are making their standard get ready with me content with an edge of humor, or people who like, there's so many comedy fans in the golf community because and in the F1 and NASCAR communities,
Right.
you know, those people that are fans of any of those things, any of those verticals, they all love comedy. And so using Reddit and finding subreddits that kind of house those interests, that can be a place to insert your comedy and engage with an audience there, even if it's not your audience yet, I think
Right.
is the smartest way to build.
Meaning you're going on to Reddit on these subreddits and posting your act, that kind of thing. Or
I mean,
posting like
it's
content.
It's comic by comic, because I wouldn't recommend just like going into like the eyeshadow girlies subreddit and then dropping a joke that has eyeshadow in it. But there is something to be said about interacting with people in those communities, engaging with posts, making your own posts, making things that kind of relate. In Jamie's case, all we did was have him use the stand-up comedy subreddit. And I was like, as frequently as you are posting on your Instagram 3 times a week, do that same thing with this post structure. I literally we have it internally, I built a Reddit for Dummies guide, basically, that's like Reddit for beginners when you're a comedian. Like, here's how you set up your account, here's the information you need on it, here's how you structure a post, here's what goes in your comments, etc. And he grew by 30% in about 45 days, just following that model. And that's just fishing from like the giant lake of comedy fans. If we got even more granular and started fishing out of these ponds of interest, that growth would continue to be even greater over time.
Was it intuitive to you to figure out like what are these overlapping markets with comedy, or how did you figure that out? That's something that's pretty interesting, because there are comedians who on the flip side, there's a lot of comedians who are into golf or into these different.
Yeah, I mean, one of the
things.
new faces we had up this year, Dean Stanfield. One of the main reasons that I signed him, other than the fact that he has a lovely mustache and it's hilarious, is that he's a race car driver and he's from Texas and he hunts and he does all these things that he can build a category of fandom around. And I mean, I think, and Logan can obviously speak for herself, but I think part of it is just having seen it work for other folks and, seeing where that digital money's coming in.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, actually, it's because I started in influencer management.
Yeah.
So I was representing, 20 plus people that all had a very different niche, because in the influencer creator world, niche is rewarded. Like, there are brands that specifically want to work with a travel creator, or specifically beauty, or insert vertical here. And so when I was working kind of in that arena, I started to see the diversity of interests within each of those niches. And so then when I stepped into comedy fully, I knew where we would be able to find the people that we were going to use to build that fan base, because people who aren't just comedy fans, right? Like, if you don't find them in the comedy pool, you're not trying to get to the top of this group of comedy fans that are watching hundreds of comedians a day. Mm-hmm. You're pushing to be the comedian that they consume that shares their interest in X area. And then that creates a devoted fan where otherwise you may not have ever reached them in that big lake of people.
I mean, there's always been a parasocial relationship in comedy.
Mm-hmm.
And, I'm a sketch nerd. I come from the sketch world. Something I would always tell people before the digital boom is you have to create a real relationship with your audience. You're not just doing comedy for them. You're their friend.
Especially after the podcasting became so
absolutely.
commonplace.
Yeah, and one thing I will say is that there's sort of, there's one thing about teaching comedians how to influence. There's also, something we pride ourselves on in the department is teaching influencers how to comedy, right? Because I mean, the truth is that a lot of the comedians that we take on from the digital world are bigger than they probably are ready for.
Yeah, exactly. It's sort of like the similar thing with Kill Tony, because they're they might have like 15 minutes, but they've got like hundreds of thousands of followers. But then I think that's what they did. It seems like with this Killers of Kill Tony tour is smart for that reason, because they can all go out together. But like, it definitely seems like there are ways you can go out there and become so successful so fast, and then you're like, basically.
Well, I mean, it used to be a much shorter, or a much longer process, rather, to build your toolbox, right? You would take in the acting part and you would put it in the toolbox. You would take the improv part and you put it in the toolbox, and the writing part, and you'd have this and this and this. And a lot of times we'll sign these folks who are very talented, but have never written a script before, have never performed on stage before, never acted before. They want to do all this stuff. They just found a meteoric success in a different part of the industry. Mm-hmm. And, it's part of our job, and something that I know I really enjoy, is helping them figure out how to do this stuff, because they all want to do more, right? They all want to do everything. They all want to be part of the traditional world. Well, maybe not all of them, but most of the folks that we work with, they want to be in the traditional world. This is just a stepping stone for them to do it. I mean, right. One of our clients, Chloe Longname, really, really well known in the digital world, just booked two gigs like right next to each other without doing any other acting work. A Netflix gig and an independent film, like a pretty big independent film, just off for social media, right? There was no acting credits. We had to make up some credits to get her into Canada, but like there was nothing there, and then social media just allowed her to do what she actually wanted to do, which is get up there and act. Right.
Man, so interesting. So other than doing something like engaging with these fan bases online, overlapping with what you're interested in, like are there other things we can elaborate on that you would just like things to keep in mind for comedians, emerging comics?
Yeah. My biggest piece of advice is stop listening to all of your friends that made up their own advice. Because the amount, and I say this with peace, love, and respect.
Hey, as somebody who made up their own advice for years, I disagree with Logan, all right?
There are some times where, and like I will be talking to a comedian, whether I rep them or not. Sometimes I'm just consulting and giving some advice, and they'll be like, well, I heard that you actually have to use this number of hashtags, otherwise it's not going to show up in the algorithm. And I'm like, who told you that? Like, where did this, and I think, too, it's because there's been so much gatekeeping in digital and in the industry more broadly, but especially with social media. But
that's why the things like your Reddit guide are so useful, because it's like, it is overwhelming. If it were me, I'd be, like, paralyzed by the seeming complexity of just trying to navigate these things, you know? Like, how does this system work?
It's an information overload, and I think that there are basics to it, right? There are best practices on socials. When you think about Instagram, this is how I kind of divide the social platforms, the big three, if you will. Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube for our astrology girlies.
Not Twitter.
Not
X.
Come on, Matt.
I'm not familiar with it.
I'm sorry to that man. I do not know that man. But the way I think about the big three is that Instagram is for friends, TikTok is for followers, and YouTube is for consumers. Wow. So Instagram is where you want to build a parasocial connection with your audience. Those are the fans that are going to consistently watch what you're putting out. They're going to be activating into like story content that you're producing. They're going to be following most closely what your journey is, because an Instagram follower is more valuable in long-term fan growth than TikTok is, because the algorithms differ, and long-term, you want to be using Instagram as friends, and that means making your fan base your friends. TikTok is for followers. The rules are pretty constantly changing on TikTok, and for better or for worse. I think that once TikTok Shop was introduced, it became a platform for physical product consuming and became less effective as a tool for selling tickets or building big fans. If we think about where people were popping up 5 years ago during the pandemic, TikTok was a one-stop shop because it wasn't really monetizable yet. It was just an evolution of Musical.ly, which was very nostalgic for people in the mid to late 2010s. And so then TikTok has changed so dramatically. So I consider it for followers because talent aren't breaking on TikTok in the way that they did 3 to 5 years ago.
Yeah, and Matt Rife has talked about this. It's so
Yeah.
funny because I watched that happen with him, having met him when he was like, doing shows on the back of a truck. But like, yeah, he's been very open about that. Like it doesn't even work. And to those asking me what to do now, good luck. Like
Exactly.
People always trend chase to some degree. Is the Matt Rifes of the world or the Stavroses of the world will get well known doing one thing, and then everybody in the world tries to do it, and that just floods the algorithm, and it just tanks out, right?
So what are some other things you commonly see people do to try to go viral that are just like misguided?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I think posting every day on TikTok is one of them. TikTok is not a valuable platform for that anymore.
Right.
Like, please make higher quality, fewer high quality videos for Instagram and YouTube. I think that on Instagram, we've kind of gotten into this rhythm almost for stand-ups where they think really critically about like what the captions on their videos look like and if the thumbnail matters, and we've gotten really granular into like what every element of a post has to look like to go viral. And the reality is, sure, make the captions look pretty, choose a good thumbnail so your grid looks good, like do a few hashtags, live your dreams. But I think what's much more important in the digital landscape, especially now when it's so oversaturated, is making yourself feel like a person and not just a comic on stage. You have to feel touchable. You can't be untouchable to people on the internet as a comedian. People value connection too much.
Right.
And so think less about how to structure your post at the granular strategic level and more about whether what you are posting is going to connect with people and the people you want to be in your audience moving forward.
I'm going to even simplify that down. Make what you like at the end of the day. I mean, I think that, places like YouTube are becoming where the under 30 generation are going to watch things. I work with Chloe Trost, and obviously she had her history with SNL, but for us, she's going to do TV, and she has a bunch of cool stuff coming up. But we're making a sketch show with Stapleview right now with her and her writing partner Sam Blumenfeld, and that's where she wants to be. Right. This isn't even necessarily us trying to shoehorn her in and try to make her internet famous. She wants to make this content, and the place that she would watch it is YouTube. And so we are making something that's super high quality that could be on television, but we're putting in the place where the audience that Chloe, most closely associate herself with will find it. So, I think people get, like Logan said, get so in their head about trying to game the system and career strive through algorithm, whatever. If you're not making something really great that you really like, then you're not going to get anywhere anyway. And, we look at, there's been a lot of case studies about Chit recently, which I'm not sure if you know. Chit. Chit's this breakout sort of almost a sitcom that started on YouTube and has a huge amount of followers. The first episode that went viral is one of the dumbest jokes I've ever seen in my life. But it's just great character work, really, really well written, really, really well shot. It knows what it is, and it does, and they obviously love making it. That show wouldn't work if they were just trying to get famous, right? They're making something they love in a really, really creative way. And as with everything in comedy, the cream's going to rise to the top.
Do you have other case studies of, clients who have found success building their own sort of content engines at places like Smosh or Dropout?
Yeah, so I represent a creator duo. Their names are Dana Hobson and Daniel Wolf. Their duo name is Dana and the Wolf. And they have created a television-quality, scripted romantic comedy series that lives exclusively on YouTube, and they've cut it down for Instagram and TikTok. And it's a full production that they've created for themselves. They've been doing the show for years now. It started as shorts during the pandemic on TikTok, as everything great did. And they've now developed it into anywhere from 10 to 15-minute longer form episodes that follow a great storyline, a lot of subplots with a really wonderful and now recognizable cast of characters. And they don't have a distributor. They don't have a producer. They're fully self-funding the show. They create it, write it, direct it, and edit it on their own. And it's a great example of what you can do and how you can build a fan base of, in their case, 2 million people across platforms simply by doing the thing that you love and just finding ways to scale it as it starts to find success. And they didn't try to gamify an algorithm.
Yep.
They don't have to like think about how they're going to post things. They don't even have a strictly regular posting schedule. They've just developed a fan base who parasocially relates to the characters. And they themselves have intentionally remained very behind the camera. There isn't a distinct Dana and Daniel created the show. It's known, but it's not a focus. It's just great work and a great show that they chose to put on YouTube.
It's going to be so interesting to see what starts happening with shows like this, given what's happening now with podcasts going on Netflix. It's like, can you imagine? Like, and what's going to happen in the balance between creator-driven content and like premium content? Because it's like they will be like, oh, we should invest in these things, right? Because you can make for way cheaper and get certain like millions of viewers, you know, instead of something that costs so much money and by comparison is going to struggle like to achieve a greater result.
I mean, yeah, I think, you know, Tubi was a really early adopter into it. And, you know, it's sort of interesting to watch like really successful creators and sort of groups who almost turn their lives into a version of a sitcom or a reality show. I mean, we work with Grant Nash, who basically they've created such a strong brand around themselves that their social media output is almost like watching like a reality show sitcom, because they play almost versions of themselves as characters.
For reference, their characters are that they are a heterosexual couple, though Grant is obviously gay, and that's the bit. And
it's not, look, the internet is not a sophisticated place, but people believe, like, they do really, really well because people believe in the brand, right? And they believe, and they have done such a good job making how stark it is that they do this kind of content. And they're doing something with Tubi that's coming up. You know, Tubi again really bought into the whole creator thing. But yeah, I mean, I think, you know, I think these companies would be foolish not to try to tap into what's going to happen with them or without them.
Is it your experience that these studio executive types understand these people and these communities? Like
more so than it used to, for sure.
Yeah.
Still some people pushing back, but I think people are understanding it a lot more than they used to.
Interesting.
And I think what's important to note is that I feel like in the last year we've been having all of these conversations and seeing all these things pop up where it's like, YouTube is the new frontier, YouTube is TV. We've been saying that for 10 years. Like, this isn't, like, we're talking about it so much again as if it's like a new idea, but I think we've been having the conversation about YouTube as the next gen television definitely since pre-pandemic. I mean,
right.
I don't think it's a new conversation that's emerging. There are people like O2L, the creator group. Smosh has been around since the early 2010s. Tyler Oakley was breaking artists on his YouTube channel in the early 2010s. Like, the landscape is not new. We're just seeing more people bite. And I think that's crucial because we've been doing this work for a long, long time, and people before us were doing this work you know, since the early 2010s when YouTube really, really gained popularity, and groups like Smosh have been doing this and being part of the reason we started having the "Is YouTube the next gen TV" convo. So I think that's crucial.
Yeah, I mean, and even looking at the way that I consume stuff now, you know, I grew up watching very, very traditional things, but I mean, I know more about this, you know, this British guy who makes hoof shaving videos in his life than I know about the Oscar races at this point. Like, it's just that you know, my eyeballs are drawn towards this stuff because there is an authenticity to it, and it just feels like the industry has to embrace it. And it looks like very much like Netflix, who, you know, obviously is such a huge force in the industry is.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to talk for a bit before we wrap up about management.
Yeah.
I've met comedians who are very skeptical of reps in general, like people that are like they're doing pretty well for themselves, to be fair, and it's like, I have come up selling my own t-shirts and booking myself, like, why do I need you? So I'm kind of curious, like, what do you think comedians or maybe the public generally like misunderstand about managers? What do you see as the value add of a manager in a comedian's career? Like, can you talk about that?
Yeah,
absolutely.
I think that what I think is important now, especially, and this is since I started in management, because the landscape has shifted so much and it's so much more like essentially guerrilla marketing yourself and finding pathways to make what you're going to make and find an audience for it. I think that more than ever, managers are strategic and creative partners now. More than they are just representatives. We are in the weeds. We're developing your live shows with you. We're developing your pilots and your features with you. We are finding ways that we can craft a web series pitch so we can get it monetized and we can put it on YouTube for you. It's a game of obviously strategizing on the business side and on the digital side, in my case, and then also on the creative side, because we have to find new avenues for the creative to almost fit them in to the wider puzzle of how to get that creative scene. So I think it's important to trust your reps, and I understand why people are skeptical. Like, I completely understand it's a new landscape. It's constantly changing, and deciding who you're going to trust with that responsibility is a major decision. But I think having that person on board to support you strategically in the business, digitally and creatively, is more important now than ever before, even when I started.
Yeah.
Let's also talk about the distinction between agents and managers, because it's a unique area with comedy. You can understand the concept a little bit easier, I think, when it comes to like an actor. Can you talk about that delineation? And if, more than ever, I feel like talent in general has to kind of make a choice often. They're like, I'm starting out. Who am I going to give 10% to? I can't give 20. So
I have the best analogy for this that I've been using. This is just me wanting to get to say it.
Please get after it.
I have been describing, especially to comedians who I'm meeting with who maybe have never had representation before, agents or managers, I'm kind of describing it as, this is a football analogy. Sorry. The client is the quarterback of the team. They're running the plays. They're ultimately making the decisions on what direction we're moving from the playbook. I consider the manager, in a Chiefs reference, to be the Andy Reid, right? We're the coach. We're supporting the quarterback while the quarterback is ultimately making the decisions on behalf of the team. And then I describe essentially agents as the offensive line, right? Like, they're the specialists. If you have a pilot you're ready to pitch, we have a lit agent who joins the line. If you have acting aspirations and you're auditioning, we get a talent agent, and that person joins the line. And so we're essentially all working together on the same team. We all just have very unique roles that we're fulfilling in order to build toward the wider vision, I suppose, of the business.
The way I describe it is much simpler than that, but I love that metaphor. That's a great way. Managers are about careers and agents are about jobs. And because agents can't really do what they do without their having the ability to procure jobs for people. And that takes time. And managers are about, the partnership thing that Logan brought up is really, really important. I came up very untraditionally. Like I said, I was a comedian. I ran comedy theaters, and I worked Joe jobs, and I did all this stuff. But I think that one of the things that makes me such a good manager is the fact that I've been where these people were, right? I've had uncertainty. I remember when our senior comedy partner Rick Dorfman first told me I should be a manager, and I said, "Cool, what does that mean?" And he got me drunk and told me what it meant. And it basically was what I was doing already, which is trying to instill people to believe in themselves, right? To see how special they were and to do the work to show people that thing that I saw. And I think, something that Authentic's the only company I've ever worked for, and something I really value about it is everybody at the company kind of believes that, right? Which is we work with people that we really believe are special, and we're going to kick ass and work our asses off to make sure that other people see that through whatever connections we can find, whatever money we can find, whatever deals we can find. Like, we're going to try everything. We're going to take every rock and we're going to flip it over to try to figure out how to make our clients' dreams come true. Because one of the things that is really important to me is when I was a young comedian, I didn't have anybody like me. I had to figure out everything on my own. It took me a really long time, and I had to work 80 hours a week to do comedy, and I didn't have the privilege that some other comedians maybe had. I don't want other people to be in that position, and I know Logan feels the same way. Like, we have to be lifting these people up and showing the world what they can do.
What does it take to have longevity at this point? Because it's just like the environment is so much more saturated and insane than it ever was, seemingly. So how do you achieve that?
The downside of the democratization of content and comedy means that you have to be that much more focused on, is this really the life that you want to live? Because there is no real downtime, right? You have to be constantly creating and pushing and making things and loving what you're doing, because, until you get to that level where you can take a break, it's just, unfortunately, there are no breaks to take at this point. It sucks, man. Look, I wish I could tell you any different. I wish that we could tell you that, we could go back to the merry old England time where you could be in a sitcom for 30 weeks and live off pilot season and, sort of make a career out of the opportunities that institutionally existed. Those institutions are gone.
Right.
So if, more people have the opportunity to do this work now, but that means that more people have the opportunity to do this work now. So you have to be that much harder.
If you could change one thing about the comedy ecosystem as it is now, what would that be?
I mean, I would love for Comedy Central to come back. I've known I said it about 7 times, but I would love to have that opportunity. That would be fantastic. But no, I just think that, there's just no real taking chances on the traditional side right now. It has to be either an actor who's been around forever and they think is going to make them money. Like, this industry's always been about the fear of losing your job, and it's so bad now. And, we're missing out on a lot of really, really cool things.
On the flip side of that, I just wish social media was demystified for comics, honestly. I wish that there was more people who understood the landscape and understood, so that not so many comedians have, I heard this advice from my friend 2 years ago and I've been following it. I wish that the information was just more readily accessible. That is what I would like to change. I wish that it wasn't so gatekept for comedians, especially those who have not been digital first, who have been on stage and grinding and finding their footing in the traditional kind of club scene. I wish it was not so gatekept for them to figure out how to succeed online. I'm grateful that I have the opportunity to teach so many comedians how to make that switch, but I wish that there was more keepers of that knowledge.
See, this is why Logan and I work really well together, because my wish is for the traditional world to be more encompassing, and hers is for the digital world to be friendlier, and that's why we're a good team.
Yeah.
Well, it's good that there are people like you out there who can help guide people, because I can't imagine it being me in that position trying to make a career as an entertainer right now. Really informative, and thank you so much for being here. It was really fun.
Thanks, Matt. This is a great time.